Welcome to Current Affairs Taiwan. Mike, what do we got up in the show today?
Well, we've got a lot of discussion of Han Kuo-Yu's recall vote. We've got some comments on Tsai Ing-wen's second inauguration. We look ahead to 2022 and 2024 elections. We talk about TSMC. And we look at the KMT and its attempt to be an opposition party. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great show.
Punchy show.
Or in my case, a paunchy show. All right. Hello, folks. Hello again, and welcome back to another edition of Current Affairs Taiwan. I'm Michael Turton, and I'm here with Donovan Smith.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, it's another busy news week with the inauguration and other good things happening.
Mm-hmm.
But first, let's talk about our favorite topic, Han Kuo-Yu's recall vote in Kaohsiung.
Oh, I thought our favorite topic was farmers' associations.
Well, I'm wrestling. It's a tie right now.
Just in case people didn't know that we were complete nerds on this stuff.
So what's going on with Han Kuo-Yu recall vote? Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-Yu is facing a recall vote on June 6th.
Mm-hmm.
What are the prospects?
Well, okay, so if you look at frozen garlic, and that's Nathan Baddo's blog. I mean, he laid it out that basically his reading of the polls was that 30 some odd % of the public was going to come out and vote yes. Now, that was his analysis 4 weeks out. But I saw a poll today, and I just crunched the numbers. Now, admittedly, it was a Taiwan State Building Party poll, so who knows how reliable it is. But if you actually look at it was 34% of the people in the poll said they would definitely go out to vote. 21%, I think, said they might go out to vote, and about 10% didn't give a clear answer one way or the other. Now, 54% of the people said they are definitely going to vote to recall him. Then it was something like a little over 20% said they would definitely vote against it. And then there was like 19% didn't give a clear answer. Now, if you only look at the definitely will vote and take the 54% who said they will vote to recall him, that comes out to about 18.7 or 18.8%.
Yeah, but I don't think that's right.
Well, that's the poll. I mean, you take 54% of 30.
But why would you take 54% of 34.5? Because Han has told his people to stay home.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the people coming out are going to be skewed green.
Mm-hmm.
So the number is higher, I think, than you think.
Well, I think it is higher than that because, some of those people who said they might vote will vote.
Sure.
And some of the people who didn't give a clear answer one way or the other on either their voting intentions and whether they were going to vote will probably show up.
Yeah.
So it smells to me from that poll, we're looking at 20 some odd %.
It's going to be close.
So it needs to be 25% of the the voting public has to vote yes. Now that's just one poll. So the stuff that Baddo was looking at earlier, made it look like it was pretty much a lock. So I don't really know, but I mean, you saw the Taipei Times reports,
right? And Han has been fighting. He just lost another case trying to get the courts to shut it down. So that says maybe the KMT internals are saying Han is doomed unless there's no vote.
Yeah.
But everything depends on the wild card of how many people actually show up, what the weather is, and if there's. Well, we both saw that article in the Taipei Times about that alleged that Han was conspiring to use gangster tactics to slow down the vote and make lines longer and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That was just someone's report.
Yeah, but they also have here, and this was in that same report, I can read from it here. Prosecutors on Wednesday initiated an investigation of Kaohsiung Civil Affairs Bureau Director General Tsai Huanrong for allegedly telling supporters of Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-Yu to interfere with the recall vote against Han. She made some comments online.
Wow.
And includes things like, but we must monitor polling stations to put pressure on people voting to recall Han, things like that. And then The Taipei Times reported on other reports, which, as you know, were allegations. And here's what it said: that members of Han's camp last week attended a banquet in Taipei for talks with China Unification Promotion Party Chairman Zhang Anle and members of the Bamboo Union Crime Syndicate. Plans were made at the banquet for gang members and Han supporters to obstruct the recall vote by lining up at poll stations where they would try to delay and disrupt the process, sources said. Some of the tactics include filming the proceedings outside of the polling stations to intimidate voters, as well as having older people and gang members in line move slowly and cause delays, such as by not presenting their identification at the head of the line, to prolong the process with the aim of making people give up on voting on what is expected to be a hot day, the sources said. Now, that's reports and allegations. We don't know for sure.
Right. If they do that, we talked about this. If they do that, people are just going to be infuriated. It's not the 1990s anymore.
No. And now my initial take, because I was basing it on Bato's numbers, where he had them at 30 some odd percent were planning to vote yes, they would have to scare off over a third of the voters. And I didn't think that was very likely. But that poll I saw today, if they were to do this, it would totally outrage. You're right. It would totally outrage people. But it may actually, knock off that 1 or 2 percentage points that they need.
Right. If this poll is good and we're reading it properly,
right,
it's closer than Bato's analysis from last month suggests.
Yeah. So if we were to assume that half of the people who said that they might vote and that 54% remained static, that would bring it up to 29%. And then if you've got some of the people who didn't give a clear answer, some of them show up, maybe you're at 30%, maybe just over.
Well, we'll see. And I think the one takeaway from this should be that a lot of people criticize this vote threshold as being too low, and I think it shows that the legislation that set this up and the decisions and the policies all were actually seem to be quite good.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be difficult for them to get the kind of turnout they need to make this count.
And that's why Huang Guochang was not thrown out. They didn't get enough yes votes to pass the 25% threshold.
Exactly. So it's already been tested before, and so it'll be tested again here, which will be good. It will show that the law was wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right.
So what else was going on in the KMT besides this recall? Johnny Chiang had a few remarks about the party's competence in opposition.
Okay, so I got some quotes here. He said that he goes, okay, here we are. I'll just read this here some. So he said this party is still learning how to be an opposition party, quote, an unfamiliar role for an organization that has spent most of the past 70 years in a position of power in Taiwan. He continued, saying the 126-year-old party was once Taiwan's only party. Not technically true, but they controlled the other party, so effectively, yeah. And has governed the country for a long period of time. It was not until 2016 that the party found itself completely in opposition, having lost the presidential election and not being in the majority in the legislature. That what the KMT quickly learned is, quote, we are definitely not good at being an opposition party, Chiang admitted. And then it goes on. As a younger generation KMT member, the Taichung native admitted that the party was carrying, quote, too much of a burden because of its culture, compared with younger political parties, making it challenging for the KMT to launch comprehensive reforms. Quote, but this does not mean we are not capable of reforms, he said, adding that pushing through reforms will be his main focus.
Pushing through reforms. Gee, did he mention any specific reforms?
Well, I mean, he's actually been pretty clear all along what the reforms that he wants to push are.
Right.
And they make sense, But here's the big question. He wants to appeal to younger voters, move the party closer to the center on cross-strait relations, work on the finances, all those kinds of things, which all make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's already backing down on some of the things he was talking about before.
Oh, like what?
He was talking.
What does he back down on?
The 92C, 92 consensus. He said they're going to consider moving away from it, but he seemed to come out the other day in support of it.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last week.
We talked about this a couple of times, and I think everyone is expecting that they'll come out with another version of the 1992 consensus.
Yeah. or just keep it. It's
Yeah.
we don't know. So my big question, I don't know what you think of this, but he's not from the elites. He's a local Taiwanese red faction politician from Taichung. He's about as far away from the elites as he could get.
Right.
And he's brought in as a caretaker by-election chairman. And so, I mean, they'll let him go with a whole new, flashy online marketing stuff. I mean, he'll get away with doing that.
Sure.
But will they actually allow him to implement much more than that? That's the big question.
I doubt it. I mean, wouldn't you want to wait until you got the next 4-year chairman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how I see that. I mean, they'll just stall everything in committee, and then next time around, we get to see who runs for chairman. That's going to be a fun election.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
definitely.
you know what? That will be gearing up towards the 2022 local elections. But I was speaking with a friend of mine who had talked to some who said the DPP, that Tsai is already setting up the DPP for this, putting her people in positions and in anticipation of this election. And what do you think of the new cabinet that she appointed?
It's pretty similar. I mean, nothing really jumps out at me.
Yeah, that's the way I saw it too.
But I did notice something. Speaking of the 2022 elections,
Mm-hmm.
have you noticed that none of this is really the Taipei one has made the newspapers, but there's been a lot of reports I've noticed in the Mandarin language media talking about, because they're right now electing party heads for each of the areas. In other words, the Taichung party head and the Zhanghua party head and Tainan, for the DPP, and it's brutal. I don't know if you've seen all these reports. The Taipei one made the English language press, and they decided to push it back after the election. But I've seen reports that Tainan, Kaohsiung, Nanto's turned really nasty. The candidates are suing each other. Zhanghua, Taichung looks like that was stable. That was a stable
Mm-hmm.
one.
Wait,
But
for which party?
the
Whose
DPP,
candidates are in the DPP? Yeah.
yeah, to run the local DPP in these geographical areas. And there's been a lot of, I mean, really nasty and vicious infighting in the DPP.
When isn't there?
Good point.
I mean, when is the DPP ever? Remember the last election when they only managed to patch things up from Ping Dong at the last minute, right? There was going to be someone. Yeah. I mean, that stuff always happens. But in the end, it will all sort itself out. It's 2 years till that election. So.
Mm-hmm. But I think it definitely shows. I mean, there's a lot of the power. The political party has a lot of power now. So I think that's why there's so much, vigorous competition.
Right.
Because
people expected, I think, to get even more.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about you were telling me the which was it? The irrigation associations? The DPP wants to, or the farmers associations?
Yeah.
Which ones? The DPP wants to put government appointed officials on the boards.
Yes.
To bring them under control.
The irrigation associations have already been nationalized.
That's right. Yeah.
But the DPP it's gone through a first reading. Now it needs to go now, so it's in committee.
Right.
If the DPP gets behind this, that means that they'll pack out the boards on the farmers and fishing associations, with 1/3 of the board would be government appointees.
Those
and then
are going to
combine
be
that with something that they passed in the law a few weeks ago, and it's already law, that they can do essentially flash audits at any time, because now they've given the ability they've cleared the way for farmers associations to be able to handle social welfare funding.
Right.
So that means that the books can be audited at any time, basically in any place, and then they want to put up to 1/3 of the board. So I think you can explain what that means.
Well, I wasn't going to remark on that. I was just going to say that's going to be the kind of thing that DPP local politicians are going to fight over, because those positions have historically been very lucrative
Mhm.
for the cronies of the people at the top of those associations.
Yeah.
But so they're going to be
mostly lean KMT. There are definitely some DPP controlled ones.
Right.
But
that's a good way to get your local
who
faction
bolted
people.
to DPP.
I was going to say that's a way that you get your local faction people rewards. You stick them on these committees. Mm-hmm. So that's yet another way that the DPP is going to try and turn the local factions, which historically have always been pro-KMT.
Mm-hmm. Or NPSU.
And we were also talking today, speaking of the 2022 election and the 2024 election, of new Taipei City Mayor Kuo-Yu, the Taiwanese and former head of the National Police Agency, who is probably the most popular politician in Taiwan, except for Tsai herself. Mm-hmm. And you were telling me about who was going to the inauguration and who wasn't.
Yeah, I thought this was very interesting. Ma Ying-jeou, a former president, decided to can it, which is a pretty strong statement. Johnny Chang, the KMT chair, Han Kuo-Yu said, "I'm not going." But Kuo-Yu said something along the lines of basically, this is an important national event. This is an important event for the nation. And it's important, to come together and unify. And so he was really positive, enthusiastic about attending. Taichung's Liu Xiuyan did show, but she was kind of like, I was like, well, after careful consideration, I decided it was important to represent the 2.81 million Taichung people. So she kind of went, but she was not very enthusiastic. But Kuo-Yu was, he's like, yeah, of course I'm going to go. Sign me up.
And then you said, was it you who noticed that he'd taken pictures? Then the pictures had been posted to Lin Jialong's feed on Twitter?
No, what happened was he posed in a picture with Liu Xiuyan, the DPP Taoyuan mayor Zheng Wensan, Ke Wen-ze, and somebody else whose name I'm forgetting right now. And he's looking all happy in the picture, and then he posts the picture up onto his Instagram. Well, the photo credit, in other words, who took the photo, was Dragon for People. And Dragon for People is an Instagram handle for Lin Jialong.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So it was Lin Jialong was taking the picture for them.
Well, like you said, Ho is very good at keeping his lines open and feeding and watering his networks to the other party so he can get resources for his city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
And we've been speculating if he ever wants to switch parties.
Yeah. I mean, the only negative I can think of from his perspective for switching parties is the fact that basically, if he were to run for president in the KMT, he would pretty much be the de facto candidate. Whereas if he were to switch to the DPP, I think it would be a little bit more of a fight against somebody like, say, William Lai. But he might still be able to win it. But it's a more powerful political party right now. Right. So I think he'll have to wait the KMT's decline versus the increased competition within the DPP, if he's considering it, which we don't know.
That's probably the only factor that's keeping him from doing it.
Quite possibly, yeah. For our listeners, a little bit of background. Kuo-Yu was originally courted by the DPP, but he eventually signed up with the KMT under Eric Chu, if memory serves, as a deputy mayor. So, yeah. But he doesn't really he doesn't come out with really very much in the way of political statements. He's just practical.
No. Yeah, he wants to look practical.
Mm-hmm.
He's not very ideological.
He doesn't come across that way at all, no. In fact, he's actually done things to distance himself from ideology.
Yeah. And looking at Wikipedia, he was born on June 7th, which is the day after Han's recall. I'm sure he'll be grinning all day if Han loses.
Yeah, he made it pretty clear during the presidential election he did not like Han.
So he's born in 1957. He's 63 this year. He'll be 67 in 2024. So he won't be too old to run.
Yep. And he seems like a pretty vigorous guy.
Yeah, not known for doing stupid things like getting drunk and staying out all night. Like some other mayors I could mention.
Yeah,
So-
and he hasn't climbed up a tree either.
So this week, Tsai Ing-wen had her second inauguration as president of the Republic of China.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one's been discussed to death on all of the, on Twitter and everywhere else. But one thing that made us both laugh was Joseph Wu's vow. Joseph Wu said
after
what?
the inauguration?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can find that quote. He basically said, let me see if I can find the exact quote because it's insane. He said he was being questioned in the legislature. And he said, I will ensure that not one diplomatic ally will be lost, Wu said. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure. That's possible.
Well, the Solomons might come back, but I mean, why would he say such a blanket statement? Because if the one is lost, he's basically given a giant cudgel to the KMT, and they'll beat him to death with it.
Exactly. What he could have said just like we'll do our best or some other platitude.
We will ensure that we will do our absolute utmost best to make sure that not one diplomatic ally is lost. Something like that. Yeah.
That's all that has to be done. So along with that same day, right, there's Tsai talking about stable and hoping for peaceful relations. And then the PLA released a video of them invading Taiwan.
I didn't see that, actually.
Yeah, that was on that little bit of irony was on the internet. And then they dropped the peaceful from reunification
at their big annual due, the two sessions.
So it's just reunification but no peaceful. But what does that mean?
Well, that's interesting here. So according to Reuters, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang left out the word peaceful on Friday in referring to Beijing's desire to, quote, reunify with Chinese claimed Taiwan. Happily, finally, Reuters is putting quotation marks behind around reunify. Li said, we will encourage them to join us in opposing Taiwan independence and promoting China's reunification. With these efforts, we can surely create a beautiful future for the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Reuters goes on and says, however, there was no mention of the word peaceful in front of reunification, departing from the standard expression Chinese leaders have used for at least 4 decades when addressing parliament and mentioning Taiwan. Now, a senior Taiwan official told Reuters that the absence of the word peaceful did not signal a fundamental change in China's approach toward the island. They are still talking about the concept of peaceful unification, just an indirect linguistic expression, said the person who's familiar with Taiwan's policy toward China, pointing to Li's remarks on cross-strait exchanges and economic integration. Quote, it's neutral. We do not look at it that way.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I'm with this official. It's not that big a deal. If it's again and again it occurs, then we have something to think about. But besides, I don't think anyone really believes that it's going to be peaceful.
Long term, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whether this is significant or not, I mean, like I said the other day, I said, I don't know. And I said basically the same thing as you said, this is worth keeping an eye on. Because we do know that the state-controlled media recently has been a lot more vocal about using military force. And when the Chinese, as I noted the other day, I said the Chinese Communist Party does things very much by the book, using jingoistic party speak formulations.
Right.
When these formulations are changed, it is also often intended to signal a change. But then again, but on the other hand, that speech was apparently cut by about a third or half over their normal length.
Oh,
So
they may have just
they wanted to keep it short
Right.
because of the whole coronavirus thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, in 2016, McCall, Tim, and I wrote a piece in response to all the idiotic claims that, now that Tsai Ing-wen has been elected president, China's certain to attack Taiwan. And we were like, no, now is not time to start worrying about Taiwan. But now I'm thinking we should follow up on that by saying, yeah, we need to start worrying about Taiwan.
I don't think they're quite ready yet. They're
No.
They don't have the, what are they called, the Type 75 amphibious assault ships. They only have one out yet, but they're manufacturing them quickly, and those will be a big deal on helping to invade. I actually had a long talk with Scott Ellinger about this.
Oh.
And because I was curious, because it looked like these were a big deal, but I wanted to talk to a military guy who really knows his stuff. And yeah, he what he told me about them scared me. They're a big game changer in a lot of ways. Essentially, the big thing is they're basically like mini aircraft carriers, and they also can carry tanks and stuff inside. But the key part that he was talking about was that it's like a small aircraft carrier, but for helicopters.
Yeah, it's a helicopter carrier that delivers troops.
Right.
Lovely.
And so he's saying that, like, if you do an airdrop, for example, from an airplane, that's very dangerous. And if you try and land troops on the beach, that's extremely difficult and dangerous. He said with the helicopters, you can get in troops very quickly, and they can, dodge about, and they're sort of much harder to stop. So
interesting.
Yeah. So he was saying that basically, up to now, they would have to either do an airdrop, which is risky and tough, or land people on the beach, and then that's basically, cannon fodder time.
Right.
But with the helicopters, they can get people into key positions because they can keep them low to the ground. So it's hard to use a missile on them because they just zip right by you. I mean, they can obviously be shot down, but it's harder. And if they've got enough of them and enough of these ships and enough of these helicopters, they'll get people in far more safely and efficiently and with much, much more precision than you can using any other method.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Well, China's been busy all along its frontier. We saw this week news out of India, where China's putting pressure on India. With once again salami slicing on the border. And then the Japanese said this week also that there had been, what was it, more incursions by Navy ships than, or maybe it was Coast Guard, but it was government vessels into the Senkakus than any previous year this year. So all along its frontier, China's messing with the neighboring countries.
Yeah. Although I must admit that I kind of had to laugh at the confrontation on the border with India. It was a fist fight. It was like a bench clearing brawl fist fight.
That's good, but they are way ahead of India in building up critical infrastructure there. And if you're going to blood your troops, that's where you might want to do it.
Yeah.
Rather than your first combat being against two major powers plus Taiwan.
Yeah. But fist fight just seems like armed troops, and they're like, forget it. We'll just throw down our arms and we'll
have
just
at each
other.
Let's see how their martial arts are. That's very human in a way, right?
God. Yeah. So it's at least there was a little humor to be gotten out of that.
Well, I think the last thing on our agenda today was the TSMC fab that's supposed to be built in Arizona. And everyone's asking the same question. Is it really going to happen?
Yeah, I think it will, but I saw an article which suggested it won't.
I've seen dozens of those articles. It's hard to say. And there's practical considerations like water. I mean, it's Arizona.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
that seemed a little odd. They need a lot of water.
It's going to be very bad for Taiwan, though, if following on the heels of Foxconn's, we can't really call it a failure. What would you call it?
Well,
Foxconn's.
There's actually signs of life on that project.
Yeah, there are some signs of life, but it's not going to be an enormous project of billions of dollars.
Well, they actually just came out with a report the other day. They started to really actually start getting some specifics and some dates, which so it looked like they're actually starting to finally ramp that up. Now they've said that before, so we don't know. But I have a sneaking suspicion that now that the U.S. is so focused on decoupling important supply chains from China, that Foxconn may view this as a way of keeping themselves on the good side of the U.S. supply chain issue.
Okay. Well, maybe it'll pan out. Let's hope they both pan out. That will help Taiwan's profile in the United States. And if they don't, that will hurt Taiwan's profile.
Yeah. I think that the reason I think the TSMC thing is going to go forward is because I think the U.S. government is dead serious about making sure that, because now they're not going to build their latest generation chips there. They've already made that clear. It'll be a generation or two behind. But I'm pretty sure that in the U.S. government's mind, they do realize that if there was a war over Taiwan, chips would become a huge issue, or generalized war in East Asia. Because, of course,
the flow of chips would stop.
Yeah, because so many of them come out of the top ones come out of Intel, and TSMC and Samsung. Those are the top three countries. The biggest one is TSMC. Now, if you go back a couple of generations, some of the older generation chips they're kind of behind the curve. A bunch of those come out of China. So those are the cheap, kind of crappy ones. But so if there's a war in East Asia, you'd have the supply would dry up out of all those countries, and that would pretty much just leave Intel, and there's no way they could keep up with all the demand on their own.
And even then, even if Samsung were to somehow ramp up production, shipping costs would skyrocket because they'd have to transit a war zone. Exactly. And you can imagine how China might exploit that fact.
Yeah, if they're not dragged into the war outright, which is entirely possible.
Well, I think we've reached our stopping point. And
on that cheerful note,
we need a joke, quick.
Well, if there's going to be a big Pan-Asia war, hopefully it will be entirely based on fistfights.
I hope not, because there's a lot more of them than us. Unless we can somehow get the Indians involved.
That'll be better than a nuclear war, I suppose.
All right, folks. You have a good week. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
哎呦，就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。